Hi everyone. Now, I'm a little bit late in doing this, but I did just want to come on and say a few words about the passing of the Canadian director Norman Jewison, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago at the age of 97 after a fantastic career and a really varied filmography. So I'm no expert on him. I'm not going to go through his entire filmography, but I do just want to show you what I've got from my collection, and in particular just touch on a couple of films from his filmography which are perhaps a little lesser known, but I think they're quite significant. Norman Jewison, I mean, he started his career in the 60s, and a really interesting starting point actually, because he was doing a lot of TV specials for various types of singers and musicians, so the likes of Judy Garland, Frank Sinatra, Danny Kaye, Harry Belafonte. So this really put him in good stead for later on in his career when he was making some musicals. But still in the 60s, he was a jobbing director, so he didn't really have control at this point. But he was involved in making a number of fun comedies. Some of which were scripted by Carl Reiner, who he became friends with, and some of these comedies were really good fun. A particular favourite of mine is Send Me No Flowers, which stars Doris Day with Rock Hudson. Now, just before he had made this, he had also made with Doris Day The Thrill of It All, which co-starred James Garner. So like I say, he didn't have control over casting Doris Day or Rock Hudson, but on Send Me No Flowers he did have some influence in terms of casting the supporting cast, and I absolutely loved Tony Randall's performance in Send Me No Flowers. But it was 1965 when he actually had his first film in which he had proper control over, at least mostly, and that was The Cincinnati Kid, which starred Steve McQueen and Edward G. Robinson. So quite a daunting film. He actually took this over from Sam Peckinpah, who had been fired from the set. Edward G. Robinson was kind of a hero of his, and then obviously Steve McQueen, big star, and it took a little bit of persuading of Steve McQueen to gain his trust, but he certainly managed to establish that, and then obviously later on they were able to reunite when he made The Thomas Crown Affair in 1968. But before getting to The Thomas Crown Affair, his next film after The Cincinnati Kid was this one, The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, a sort of political satire about the absurdity of conflict and the need to coexist. And this one starred Alan Arkin and a great cast that also included Eva Marie Saint, Carl Reiner, who he had enjoyed working with as a writer, and Jonathan Winters and Brian Keith. Then in 1967 came possibly one of the most significant films from his career, In the Heat of the Night, starring Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger. This introduced us to the character of Virgil Tibbs, played by Sidney Poitier, and in 1967 this was a key time for making a film about racial prejudice. Very influential film this, and absolute classic that it's become over the years, obviously with its sequels as well, which were They Call Me Mr. Tibbs and The Organisation. And then, as mentioned, in 1968, he reunited with Steve McQueen and made this classic, The Thomas Crown Affair, a robbery, but a very seductive one and very sensual as well, co-starring Faye Dunaway, and there's that famous chess sequence in it. But when it came to the 70s, he was then able to look at making musicals and made this absolute classic, Fiddler on the Roof, which starred Topol. And then if one musical wasn't enough, he went on to do Jesus Christ Superstar in 1973, an adaptation of the music and lyrics from Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, and with a script by Melvin Bragg. And this was a huge success. In 1975 came the classic futuristic sports drama Rollerball, which starred James Caan and really looked at the nature of violence and how political systems had sort of broken apart and people were being controlled by corporations. Quite a fascinating one, this. Just a few stills from the film. That's James Caan with Burt Kwok, and here he is with Ralph Richardson. Now in 1978, and with Sylvester Stallone starring, fresh from his success in Rocky, came Fist, which was about the American labour movement. Now this one didn't really do very well at the box office, and actually Norman Jewison describes it as being one of his least satisfying experiences. So yeah, not many people were willing to go and see this film, and actually kind of during the making of this, Norman Jewison was committed to it, but he was actually more keen on making The Dogs of War, which he ended up being an executive producer on, and this was actually in the end directed by John Irvin. Jewison closed off the 70s by making Unjustice for All with Al Pacino. Going into the 1980s, and probably a couple of the most significant films from his career there include A Soldier's Story from 1984, again looking at sort of racial prejudice. This is a World War II legal drama. And then also 1987's Moonstruck, which starred Cher and Nicolas Cage. In the 90s, perhaps the most significant film from his career was this one, The Hurricane, which was starring Denzel Washington as the boxer Reuben Carter, who was jailed for 20 years for a crime he didn't commit. And Jewison's final film from 2003 was this one, The Statement, starring Michael Caine. So when you look at the filmography of Norman Jewison overall, it's really quite fascinating to think about just how diverse it was. He certainly was interested in musicals. He could do very affecting dramas about racial matters. He was also interested in politics and power struggles and legal systems. He could do comedy, and he was certainly interested as well in human dynamics, relationships, and love. And it's just in that final respect on love, if you like, that I want to just bring up a couple of films which I think go a little bit under the radar when it comes to Norman Jewison's filmography. So just to put it in context, I think if you go back to the Thomas Crown Affair, I mean, there we've got that great relationship between Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway, but love, if you like, there is very much a seduction and it's very much a game. And then in Moonstruck, we have someone who is not getting any younger, and they're almost prepared to settle for a relationship until they get swept off their feet. So it's very much that kind of romance element that should still be vibrant and alive in a relationship. And then there's Only You, which Norman Jewison made with Marissa Tomei and Robert Downey Jr. And there, love is very much seen as being a destiny. It's something you're destined to find. But then there's two other films which, like I say, kind of go a little bit under the radar. And one of those is from 1982, and it's this one, Best Friends, which starred Burt Reynolds and Goldie Hawn. Yeah, I think this is a really fascinating one, this. Really, for both actors, Burt Reynolds and Goldie Hawn, this was quite an atypical kind of film for them. I mean, Burt Reynolds certainly wasn't accustomed to doing a sort of low-key comedy drama, and Goldie Hawn had come off from doing Private Benjamin. So again, this is a really kind of low-key film. The film itself is about a couple who live and work together as writers, and they're quite happy in that relationship, and they're very close, and it's just how they've always been. But they kind of push that button to sort of think, maybe we should get married. And then when they do, it then involves them going to meet each other's respective parents. And then when they get to see how each other acts in front of each other's parents, it really starts to bring into question about whether they do really love each other, and actually whether they would prefer to go back to being how they were. So yeah, a really interesting one, this. Lovely supporting cast. You've got the likes of Barnard Hughes and Keenan Wynn, for example, as being the respective parents. But yeah, this one, I guess it probably didn't really work at the box office because people weren't perhaps wanting to see Burt Reynolds and Goldie Hawn in this kind of low-key comedy drama, and also the chemistry between them is, if you like, a little bit questionable, but then that's kind of almost how it should be, because like I say, this is a kind of looking at a relationship where perhaps the dynamics aren't quite right for a marriage. So I find all that quite interesting, and I definitely think this film shouldn't be ignored. Definitely it's a good time to reappraise it, but yeah, a very good one, Best Friends. And then the other one I just want to mention is this one, Dinner with Friends. So this actually involves two married couples, except one of the couples is going to separate, and the other couple feels guilty about that because they actually introduced the other couple to themselves quite some time ago. So then we get into looking at the sort of dynamics of that, of like who will they actually side with, and what does it say about their own relationship. So again, this is a really fascinating one and looks at a lot of aspects of love and interaction and relationships. So again, this one has been quite a low-key drama, I think. I don't think too many people have seen it, but yeah, really good cast. Andie MacDowell is probably giving a career best performance in this, and then we've also got Dennis Quaid, Greg Kinnear and Toni Collette. So yeah, really a likeable drama, this one. So I just think both of those dramas, looking at relationship issues and love, are definitely worth looking at in the whole context of Norman Jewison's career. Like I say, when you look at how he's approached love in other ways, with Moonstruck, Only You, etc., etc. Anyway, I've waffled on for a bit now, and my voice is still not right because I'm still just getting over the flu. But yeah, I just did want to say these few things about Norman Jewison. I hope that all makes sense. Thank you very much for watching. All the best to you. I hope you'll join me again for some other videos. Take care.